All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, you are with you guys later. We'll have John Iadarola, Adrian Lawrence. Unfortunately, Anna's got COVID again. Maybe it was from all that screaming for the last couple of days. Please, Democrats, do something, which is actually going to lead to our first guest here. So joining me now, Senator Nina Turner from Ohio. She was just involved, of course, in the contentious Ohio 11 race in Cleveland. Senator Turner, welcome back to the Young Turks.
Glad to be here with you, Cenk.
All right, so we didn't get the result that you were looking for again this time around the second race. Combined, it looks like about $6 million were spent against you at least in the two races. To give people context, Ohio 12, which is right next to you, a combined $3,000 was spent. So it's obvious, given Hillary Clinton the first time, Joe Biden this time, Clyburn, Democratic leadership, Trump PACs, Trump donors, Democratic donors, oil lobbyists, drug companies, etc. They were worried about you for some reason. Do you know why they were so concerned about making sure that you didn't get into Congress?
Yeah, because they know that I hail from the Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm school of the Democratic Party, which is unbought and unbossed, and that I would stand up for the people relentlessly as they stand up for their corporate owner donors. That's why, and they knew that I would embarrass them for the things that they have not accomplished on behalf of the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class in my district and in this country.
So I want to come back to what they have not accomplished in a second, but you mentioned Shirley Chisholm. I noticed the other day that Hillary Clinton at the Met Gala had some names sewn into her dress, and one of them was Shirley Chisholm. And I thought that was a little bit ironic, given that Shirley Chisholm mainly railed against moderate Democrats, just like Hillary Clinton. I don't know that you saw that you were in the middle of your important race, but what's your take on Hillary Clinton claiming ownership over Shirley Chisholm in that sense?
No, I didn't see it, and hypocrisy is nothing new to neoliberals.
Yeah. All right, yes, and Hillary Clinton, of course, wanted to give advice first time around on how to win. Just real quick, remind me if Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump.
Well, certainly not. No, did not, and in the state of Ohio, did not either. Trump won this state twice, actually.
That's interesting. Yeah, we'll be looking forward to her advice later on how to win. Let's note that Donald Trump has an IQ that is probably in the single digits. Okay, now, you talked about how you said you might embarrass them for the lack of action that they're taking and for the fact that they're following their corporate donors. Now, the Democratic establishment in Washington says no, they've done plenty. You don't get voting rights, and they're never going to vote on it again. You don't get $15 minimum wage, and they're never going to vote on it again. And by the way, on women's rights, they're not going to bother trying to take away the filibuster, which means it has no chance of passing, and they know that. Do you think that that's somehow being more democratic to give up on all of those democratic priorities?
No, less democratic in terms of what this party is supposed to stand for. I mean, there are two major parties in this country. Obviously, I'm not saying anything that is new to anyone. The point is that one of these parties should be working on behalf of the people who need it the most. And that is not to let the recalcitrants and the mayhem of the Republicans, let's not let them off the hook. But my party has the majority in both chambers, and they have the presidency, and they need to act like it. People are literally dying. They're losing their livelihood, they're losing their lives. Millions of people have died from COVID. If we had had universal health care in this country, we might have been able to save more lives. So it is things like that, increasing the minimum wage as you laid out there, that the Democrats could have done and still can do before November to ensure that Democrats are changing material conditions and giving the people something they can feel for real instead of tweeting all the time as if they are powerless. They're not powerless. They have the power. The people gave it to them in 2020.
But to be fair, if they took away the filibuster, yes, they could pass Roe on a national level. So all women's rights would be protected. And yes, they could pass voting rights so everybody could vote and be safe in that and end this insanity of gerrymandered districts. But if they took away the filibuster, then they would have no excuse to not do things like paid family leave and $15 minimum wage and lower drug prices, which all hurts their donors. I mean, don't you want to be fair to their donors? Without the filibuster, those poor corporate donors would have no protection at all.
Well, there it is. And let's throw in the George Floyd Policing Act too. So much of what my party promised in 2020 is not happening. And let us not forget the child tax credit by way of example, a real example that people can feel in real time. It was a great policy position. It took children out of poverty. And oh my God, because one senator in particular did not care to see that renewed. It is not renewed. And we have pushed, or they have pushed, children who were once lifted out of poverty slightly right back there. I mean, it doesn't get more ridiculous than that, but your point is well taken. If to get rid of the filibuster, then all of their excuses are out the door.
Yeah, well, I mean, do women really need to have control over their own bodies? And by the way, I say that with intense sarcasm, but mainstream media is pretty dense. So God knows how they'll quote that out of context. So speaking of which, I want to ask you about that. So since you criticized Democratic Party leadership from time to time, you were painted as somehow against Democrats, as if you were for Republicans. Would you like to fight Republicans more or less than current Democratic Party leadership?
More, and as I did when I served in the Ohio Senate, where Republicans had super majorities, I had to go up against them. I was the minority whip in my caucus just for that reason. I mean, minority whip does a lot of things, but part of it is, being part of a leadership team that takes it to the other party. And they were wrong most of the time. And I did have to take it to them most of the time. So I'm very accustomed to being in an environment where Republicans have the majority and we got to fight like hell. And because legislatively, we didn't have control. So you had to use the bully pulpit. And no one was more masterful at using that than myself. So yeah, the progressives fight the Republicans harder than neoliberal corporate Democrats. But we find ourselves, Cenk, having to fight a multi-pronged war, and that is both against the corporatists in our party and the corporatists in the Republican Party too.
So, Senator Turner, you don't know this, but the Democrat who won the primary in your neighboring district in Ohio, 12, said that you're her role model and that she got into politics because she saw you fighting back aggressively in the Ohio State House. And at the time she didn't know you, but she was like, wow, who is this person? And so it's funny how you're inspiring Democrats to run and to fight, even though the mainstream media paint you as being against Democrats. It's almost like it's an alternate reality, like Trump winning the 2020 election, or that progressives who want to fight Republicans harder and do more Democratic policies are somehow more right wing. Is the mainstream media also and Democratic leadership pushing an alternative facts on what progressives' true positions are?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we may have a few allies, let me say that, in the mainstream media, but overall, the model, the framing of the mainstream media is to make it seem like progressives, freedom fighting progressives, because Cenk, we fighting against Pinos too, progressives in name only. But we can come back to that at another time. But to make it seem as though there's an equal on the other side, the radical, there is no comparison to the radical right and freedom fighting progressives. Because one thing about progressives, and certainly, no one is perfect. No views are absolutely, 100% in terms of being perfect. We're not fighting for perfection. We're fighting for justice. And there is no way to say that a group that is fighting for Medicare for all, paid leave, increasing the minimum wage, you name it, voting rights. There's no comparison to that, to what the right wingers are trying to do. So instead of being honest about freedom fighting progressives, they try to make a false equivalency. And it is a false equivalency. A matter of fact, it's a damn lie equivalency, because there is no similarity between freedom fighting progressives and right wingers who are trying to take away all liberties, including a woman's agency to be able to control her own body. You don't see progressives are not doing that. Freedom fighting progressives are not doing that.
So next week we'll have a longer interview where we might talk a little bit more in detail about those pinos. But I want to ask you one more question here. You mentioned right-wing policies. Well, curiously, right now as we speak, Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn are campaigning for Henry Cuellar down in Texas. He's running against a young progressive, Jessica Cisneros. And Cuellar has not only been raided by the FBI and is notorious for corruption and might soon be arrested for corruption, but he also is anti-choice. He has voted with Trump. He has voted with Republicans over and over again. He is very clear. He is against Roe. He is against a woman's ability to choose. Is it a betrayal of democratic principles for Pelosi and Clyburn to go and try to make sure he gets elected into Congress?
Oh, very much so. And they're not ashamed of it, because for the most part, they will not be called out on this. People will make excuses. They should absolutely not be in this race. Even if they somehow wanted to. See, Quasar lines up more even beyond they might disagree with him on the abortion, but he lines up in every other way because he's a corporatist. And so they're choosing to turn a blind eye to this thing and be up on Twitter tweeting about how wrong the Republican-controlled United States Supreme Court is, instead of taking the mote out of their own eye, which is you have a young freedom-fighting progressive that is standing up for women's rights and other rights in this country, but yet you choose the other guy. It's basically like Wizard of Oz. Don't look at the man and the woman behind the curtain. That's what's happening here. The world is upside down.
So when Nancy Pelosi huffs and puffs and makes public speeches about how she wants to get Roe back as law in this country, but meanwhile fights with all of her being in a race that she has no business in South Texas for an anti-choice candidate, she's fighting tooth and nail to make sure that there's another vote to take away women's rights. Wouldn't that make her a giant liar and a hypocrite?
Oh, hypocrisy is, again, nothing new to neoliberals, and people should recognize that you can't do both of these things. This man is the total antithesis of it without, there's no a half measure on where he stands. He is the antithesis of this at a most pivotal time in this country's history when it comes to Roe v. Wade. And so, yeah, it is hypocrisy. That is what it is. And people should see it for what it is and call it out for what it is and not be afraid to equivocate. We can't be mad at the Supreme Court, but then think it's okay for people like Clyburn and Pelosi to be in that state, railing against a candidate that is standing up for women's right to choose. You can't have both. Learn that on Sesame Street when they do the segment on shapes. One of these things don't belong. Okay, all that we learned in kindergarten. One of these things don't belong, and what they are doing right now is wrong. But Cenk, I'll tell you this: corporatist Democrats will do anything, even locking arms with corporatist Republicans, if it comes down to hurting progressives, freedom-fighting progressives. That is for sure, and that is why they are down there.
By the way, Jessica Cisneros would, of course, be in much better shape to win the general elections since she's not being investigated by the FBI in the middle of the election. But they don't mind losing the election to a Republican either. Clyburn and Pelosi, they came for the corruption, but they stayed for the right-wing policies in South Texas and back in Cuellar. Nina Turner, have they seen the last of you?
That part on that one. Oh no, absolutely not. My resolve has just been reinforced because it is very, very clear that my black girl magic must be all of that for them to spend $6 million against me in 2 back-to-back campaigns, from the president to coming into this race all the way to cryptocurrency billionaires and oil baronesses and all other manner of folks from DMFI to APAC. They made up PACs. Oh no. They have not seen the last of me. They just made it so that Sister Turner will be totally unleashed. As my mama once said, sometimes you get what you ask for. So yeah, they're gonna get what they asked for.
Absolutely right. I knew that they were incredibly scared of you when they sent the president to say, oh, no, she would actually make us do the things that we were lying about. Oh, okay. Well, now at least your intentions are super clear. When it comes to fighting anti-choice legislators, they join their side. They literally join their side. But when it comes to a progressive champion that actually wants them to do the Democratic policies, they are lions and they bring all their lobbyist friends with them. But no matter what happens, Nina Turner's right here, and we thank you for joining us on the Young Turks. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to be back on the Young Turks, Cenk. I gotta tell you, there's a lot of love for TYT in Ohio 11 Congressional District. I want you to know that. I met a lot of people who watch and just adore your network. So thank you for all that you and the team there do.
Thank you, Senator Nina Turner. We appreciate it. All right, we'll be talking more to her next week. We'll see what other revelations come out of that race. When we come back, important developments, including fake efforts by Democrats, which they know are going to fail, but they do it anyway. We'll tell you all about their tricks and how they don't intend to fight for women in this country at all. We have definitive proof and evidence of that when we return. Turks, Cenk, Uygur, John Iadarola with you. Also, Michael Meyerless, Matthew Hightower, and Trudy Smith. They all just hit the join button below on YouTube and became Young Turks members. Without them, we can't have the show. So Trudy, Matthew, and Michael, thank you. We love you guys. And everybody that isn't on YouTube, tyt.com/join to become a member. John, what do you got for us?
I've got the news, which is appropriate for this program. Okay, let's talk about it. If you've been eagerly anticipating President Joe Biden declaring a national emergency over the climate, I have a question and a news update for you. The question is, what are you smoking? Seriously, you thought that was gonna happen? But the news update is perhaps even more important, and that is that 2 Democratic senators have crossed the aisle to team up with Republicans to stop Joe Biden from doing that. This is Senators Manchin and Kelly. They joined Republicans to approve a motion aimed at barring President Joe Biden from declaring a climate-related national emergency, a step that green groups have been pressuring him to take since his first day in office. And the pressure has been even greater since largely their inability to pass any sort of major legislation having to do with climate change. The executive order, the executive branch focus aspect of the response to the climate crisis becomes even more important when the Senate won't act. And so those 2 votes, by the way, from Kelly and from Manchin, were enough to make the difference. It is, at the end of the day, a non-binding motion, but it was approved by a vote of 49 to 47, stating that Biden, quote, cannot use climate change as the basis to declare a national emergency. House and Senate lawmakers will consider the motion as part of their efforts to finalize legislation packed with subsidies to profitable microchip corporations. So again, as always, there's some stuff that money flows out the door very easily towards, and others where it's the last thing they're willing to do, Cenk. And again, non-binding, but it's also significant. It certainly says something about where those 2 Democratic votes might be for any sort of climate-focused legislation through the rest of this term.
Yeah, so there's so much hypocrisy here. I don't know that we can fit it in one show. So they told us, the Democrats did, we don't have any money. I mean, we'd love to do Build Back Better, but inflation and all of that stuff. Wait a minute, you just did $52 billion of subsidies for Amazon and the big tech companies. And by the way, $125 billion over the next 4 years for a blanket corporate tax exemption. So apparently we had plenty of money. You just didn't want to do paid family leave. You didn't want to do a higher minimum wage. You didn't want to do child tax credit. You didn't want to do any of that. I'm talking about the Democrats. But when it was time for corporate giveaways, they had tons and tons of money. And then, okay, now we turn to climate change. At least you're gonna do something, anything that you could do, right? Because they always say, there's nothing we can do. Nothing we can do, okay? But wait a minute, you voted with the Republicans. You voted with the Republicans, right? So to block this climate change issue. Because on this one, Biden can actually unilaterally act as the president. And here comes the corporate Democrats who say, no, whatever you do, do not ever act on Democratic policies. We must always kiss the ass of Republicans. Now that's not just Joe Manchin, Mark Kelly, corporate Democrat in Arizona. When he's running for office, he's begging for money online. Oh, I'm going to be a big time progressive. Oh my God, I'm going to pass all these policies. When he gets in office, he's like, Republicans, how can I help? Let's make sure that we burn down the planet. You're going to be shocked to find out that they helped the oil companies here. And it turns out the #1 recipient of fossil fuel money in all of Senate, the entire Senate, is not a Republican. It's Joe Manchin. Oh my God, he did the bidding of his donors? That is such a big surprise. Look, if you watch the Young Turks, that's the least surprising thing you've ever heard. But you have to understand something. Like normal Democrats that watch cable news and read New York Times, they've probably never heard of that.
Yeah.
They have no idea how much money Manchin takes from oil companies to sell you out. But John, I also looked up the rest of the Democrats, and guess who was #3 in most money taken from fossil fuel companies among Democrats?
Oh, I've got the numbers. If you want, we can go to them at some point.
Yeah,
but
let's go to them. In fact,
it's some notable ones. Okay, we're gonna get to it in just a sec. And you're totally right. By the way, I would ask, you occasionally have these analyses of like CNN, MSNBC, ABC, like how much do they talk about a certain topic? Like how much have they, for instance, talked about climate change the course of a year? I would love to see the numbers for literally anything having to do with campaign finance. Like we're gonna show you a graphic of oil industry, like fossil fuel industry donations. Like have they shown on CNN in the last year a chart like that about literally any candidate?
No way, 0% chance.
Isn't that madness?
So wait, all the oil companies give money to Joe Manchin, and throughout his career, it's been millions and millions and millions of dollars. And CNN and New York Times don't think that's relevant. It's not relevant to his decision making, so they purposely hide it from you. News. Yep. They don't do news. They do marketing for corporations.
Yeah, and you're seeing it right there. I mean, Joe Manchin is at the top. You've got James Langford, John Kennedy. Nobody's really surprised by that. Lisa Murkowski, Tim Scott, but Kyrsten Sinema does manage to squeak in there. So she wasn't one of the 3. Although honestly, it's possible they just talked to each other and they figured out how many needed to cross over. And if it hadn't been Kelly, it would have been Sinema. It's impossible to say, but in this case, she gets to be the better of the 2 senators from Arizona, and they're being very well paid for that. And by the way, they are then paying the industry back directly, not just in stopping him from declaring a climate-related national emergency, which of course now allows Fox News and the right to say any declaration like that would be totally invalid. It's a bipartisan condemnation of that sort of fear-mongering. That's what they just gave to the right. So there's a separate motion that instructs lawmakers to reject provisions that, quote, prohibit development of an all of the above energy portfolio. So what they're saying is, oh, like we should totally do something about climate change, and like, maybe we can have a little bit of solar or something, but we should also have oil and natural gas and coal, and we really shouldn't change anything, is what they're saying. And that is another aspect of this. Along the way, by the way, I don't know if maybe it's been mentioned on the Young Turks earlier this week. There's a heat wave that hit South Asia, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And it produces one of those apocalyptic looking maps you can see here of India there. Absolutely insane, unsustainable, unlivable temperatures. And it just makes me think so much about those polls you occasionally see where they'll ask people, do you expect to see the consequences of climate change in your life? And the headline will be like, it's up to 40% now think at some point in their life, they'll see the consequences. And I'm like, what are you talking about at some point in your life? Like, look around. Do you not get what's going on in the world? Maybe it's okay in your particular part of the United States, but there's wide swaths of the world that are becoming effectively unlivable, impossible to grow food, impossible to survive during big portions of the year.
Yeah, look, I was teasing that who the 3rd biggest recipient was among Democrats of fossil fuel money, but I'm glad you put up that chart because it let me recheck it because I'd missed Sinema. And then I realized I missed Schumer and one other person too. So I double checked, and it is Mark Kelly is the 6th biggest recipient of fossil fuel money among Democrats. And funny enough, Mark Kelly, after stuffing his pockets full of oil company money, decided to vote with the oil companies and make sure we can't do anything about climate change. And by the way, I guarantee you later, Democratic ass kissers mainly that work in mainstream media, will come and say, "Oh, you're so against Democrats. You're trying to help Republicans because you're pointing out Mark Kelly's corruption."
Yeah.
No, I hate Republicans, and I want Mark Kelly to fight Republicans. I didn't vote with the Republicans. Mark Kelly just voted with the Republicans. Mark Kelly just voted with the Republicans and sold out all of his Democratic voters. But to be fair, how else would he take all the money from the oil companies? They really genuinely believe this in Washington. Like, they're just as crazy as Trump voters who think Trump won the 2020 election. They're burning down the planet for their nickel and dime corruption. These people are disgusting. And by the way, one last thing, John, about hypocrisy, and it's about the Republicans. They say, "Oh my God, big tech, we're gonna fight big tech. Oh God, oh yeah, big tech's terrible." They just shoveled hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies to them.
Yeah.
Why? Because they get the same campaign donations. Hey, right wingers, are you ever gonna hold your own accountable? All of your senators, except Mike Lee, okay? Credit where credit is due. So all I care about is the policies. I don't care what's on their goddamn helmet. Everybody in Washington is like, "Oh, well, if you don't kiss Democratic ass, then I guess you must be a right winger." You idiots, don't you know anything about politics? So credit to Mike Lee here, but all the other Republicans were like, "Oh, we're just lying about fighting big tech. In fact, we shoveled billions of dollars into their pockets. Ha ha, right-wing voters, we tricked you again." That's called the swamp, right wingers. You should look at your own guys the way we do. You should try being honest for a change.
Yeah, and by the way, they also have you believe that they hate big tech and they hate like unilateral control over social media platforms. They're cheering a big tech guy who bought and now has unilateral control over a social media platform. Not necessarily unilateral. Today they released some of the donors. They're the people who are involved in that investment, and it's people from like Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. So just normal free speech stuff. But anyway, I wanted to talk about a couple things. One, Kai Newkirk, progressive activist, pointed out one interesting little bit about it being Manchin and it being Kelly, saying an astronaut who's seen the planet from outer space voting to remove one of the only tools we have to confront the climate crisis that isn't blocked by the filibuster and Manchin's corruption. This is an outrageous betrayal, Captain Mark Kelly. Shame on you. Yeah, at the end of the day, he's a human and he's a politician, and politicians are going to be corrupt. But he's actually been out there. He's seen it. He knows. And there have been politicians. There have been astronauts in the past that say you can't look at the Earth without fundamentally changing the way you see things like nationalism, like our individual humans having compassion, all that. But apparently you can switch them back by paying them enough money. And let's focus for just
well, to be fair to Mark Kelly, when he looked down on Earth, he might have seen oil cash and thought, "Yes, I can't wait to land and stuff my pockets full of that oil corporate cash. And then I'll betray all my voters and vote with the Republicans." And then the mainstream media will say I'm a moderate, and give me credit for betraying my own voters. And then we'll yell at my critics and tell them that they're with the Republicans when I'm the one voting with them. So that's Mark Kelly for you guys.
Absolute madness. I want to. Can we just bring up that chart of the amount of money donated, at least according to the stock, in 1 year from oil and gas companies to Joe Manchin? $687, $687,000, $745. Now, I mostly want to focus on this because you never know when you're going to have people who will watch a show or watch a political, stream for the first time. What rational person thinks that they gave more than $500,000 in just 1 year to one politician and didn't expect to be paid back for that? That like they're just Joe Manchin enthusiasts, or they just love West Virginia and they just want to like make it rain on West Virginia. It is the most obvious bribe ever. And to go back to what we said earlier, no one in mainstream media will talk about this. No one, even the ones that pretend to be progressives or whatever on MSNBC, are not going to focus on this obvious, transparent corruption.
No, never. They'd get fired from MSNBC if they ever talked about corruption, because that gives away the game. John, though, to be fair, there are a couple of Americans who believe it is not corruption or bribery, and that the oil companies are giving Manchin $687,000 just because they care about the general welfare, and Manchin does not take it into account when he votes. Yeah. Those couple of people are called reporters in our system.
Exactly. Okay, well, why don't we move on? We were talking here about really awful Democrats. Let's switch it up, Cenk, and let's talk about some really awful Democrats. So at this point, Democrats in the Senate, in the House, in Congress don't seem to be planning all that much to deal with what's been revealed about the SCOTUS and the future of Roe v. Wade. But even though they, in theory, have a bill, seemingly largely symbolic, that'll do something about it, even in that, they're capitulating to the right in a number of different ways, and we want to reveal those to you. So the bill's lead sponsor is Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, and he tweaked the bill to appease worries from what Politico here is calling moderates. They'll never define what that actually means, stripping out some of the, again, just non-binding language about abortion that raised some objections. It's also at the same time far from clear if Joe Manchin, an abortion rights opponent, would vote differently than he did in February when he opposed the Democratic bill. So again, there's still anti-choice Democrats in office. And so here are some of the issues with the language that they had. Some of it had to do with tying reproductive rights and abortion and all that to gender oppression, basically language around gender. The latest version, let's see, it strips out statements linking abortion restrictions to white supremacy, gender oppression, and emphasizing that the protections in it apply both to women and transgender men, non-binary individuals, those who identify with a different gender, and others. Because even though those groups do need equal access to these rights, it looks bad, I guess, to right wingers, and they're terrified at all times of the right criticizing them or talking. I don't know, maybe they'll give a speech on the House floor, Cenk, about Disney or something in relation to this. So once again, those groups get thrown into the garbage by the Democratic Party because they think that'll stop the right from criticizing them when they try to do this.
No, every part of this is absurd. It's absurd. What a set of liars and frauds. So let me explain the facts to you guys. So number one, they're stripping out this bill to appease the right wing. So does that mean that the right wing is going to vote for it? No, almost no. There's a couple of Republicans that say, if you water it down further, I might vote for it. And so we'll get to that in a second. But is it even going to convince the Democrats that are ready to vote no like Manchin? No, Manchin says no, I water it down and I might still vote no. What kind of a sucker would water it down without a guarantee with a vote? Look, I don't mind horse trading, but you're giving him everything he wants. He's giving you nothing. This is classic Joe Manchin and classic idiot Democrats are like, okay, we'll just give it to you. Look, those particular provisions, they're nice to haves. If they took those provisions out, but made Roe the law of the land, I would do that deal because I'm practical, okay? And then we'll come back to that and we'll see if we can pass that language. But they're getting nothing in return. And then you say, okay, well, Susan Collins and Murkowski, oh, that's interesting. Well, that's a second set of compromises. Now, those compromises are actually part of the core legislation and would actually compromise women's rights to choose. But the Democrats are considering going to do that as well. Oh, well, all right, but then are we going to at least get some protections passed? Oh, no, none of this is ever going to pass. At most, they would, if they do literally compromise on top of compromise, they would only get 52 votes at most, and none of that is promised. But because they won't take away the filibuster, you need 60 votes. So all of this is a joke and a lie being played on you. Any reporter, any media outlet that doesn't tell you that this is all marketing by the Democrats who do not actually intend to pass this law are helping them to do propaganda. It's alternative facts. When you ask Schumer, are you going to take away the filibuster? Because that is the only way this can pass. He says, no, they're not even going to vote on it. They're a joke. Well, and people in Washington say, no, if you applaud the Democrats' lies harder, then it'll somehow pass. Really? Where's your 8 Republican senators? You want to know why they're not voting to take away the filibuster? Because then they would leave no excuse for their corporate donors. The Democrats say they want child tax credit, paid family leave, higher wages. They're all lying. They don't want any of those things because their donors don't want it. If you take away the filibuster, it leaves them vulnerable to charges of hypocrisy. So they say, we'll just do a fake vote. And of course we won't protect women. In fact, Democratic leaders like Nancy Pelosi today are fighting for anti-choice legislators like Henry Cuellar in Texas. She's trying to help take away rights of women. She's trying to put another vote in for an anti-choice candidate. The Democratic leadership are filled to the rim with absolute, undeniable liars and hypocrites.
Yeah, and there's no, like, it's Henry Cuellar. It's what do you desperately need to have in the party because he's just so popular? Why are you holding on to Henry Cuellar? Him being anti-choice, that's, I guess, in like the top 5 worst parts of him, but the rest of that list is awful too. He's horrible in a number of different ways, and they could easily elect Jessica Cisneros. But again, it's not that they don't get that Cisneros is, like potentially like a superstar in the Democratic Party, obviously far more representative of where the country is going. It's that they do get that, but they don't want it. They don't want any of these stars on the left that can draw attention to these sorts of issues and everything. And so, as Cenk said, they're gonna do this just far enough until it gets filibustered. And along the way, since the only thing they're gonna have is this symbolic bill, they're gonna make it the weakest symbolic bill possible, thus getting the least benefit out of it. When alternatively, they could do something. They can't necessarily get Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin to switch over, and they're obviously not even going to try. But what they could do, Cenk, is they could actually make the Republicans filibuster this, and not for 5 seconds, not in some sort of procedural thing, and then we immediately move on to the next bill or whatever. They could make them hold the floor for days or for weeks or for months. And they could draw the attention of the entire country to the Republicans being willing to do this, an almost unprecedentedly long filibuster specifically to strip women of their rights. And I know most people think, well, of course they'd still be willing to do that. Maybe, but the right is running scared from even talking about the implications of what the SCOTUS leak has revealed. They understand that this isn't politically popular, and it'll be a lot less popular after they shut down the US government for literally months to do it. And as I said on my show this morning, some people might think, well, yeah, maybe, but then the Senate wouldn't be able to accomplish anything for a few months. And I wanna laugh in your face over that. They're not gonna do anything between now and the election. So shut it all down. Make them filibuster until the vote actually happens in the midterms. Do that, show these groups that you actually have their back. And honestly, for all of those who pretend that this is about the tradition of the filibuster, Kyrsten Sinema, who lies about how it protects vulnerable groups when, as Cenk points out, no, it protects the most privileged people in this country from having to ever take a stand on anything and reveal who they truly are. Then this would be, if you love the tradition of the filibuster, let's go back to the traditional filibuster. And let's have a months-long filibuster over this. Cenk, they're not gonna do it, but there should be a national campaign to try to force them to do that.
Yeah, of course they're not going to do it. And then if you do that campaign, the media will yell at you in unison. Every hack in Washington will yell at you in unison. You're hurting the Democrats' ability to do nothing and to lie to their voters nonstop. Please you're hurting them with the truth. Don't do it. Okay, look, just when you think it can't get worse, it always gets worse. So last 2 things on this. Sean Hannity, as you'll see later in the show, had Tulsi Gabbard on, and he said something really curious. He's like, I mean, abortion is not going to be illegal in America anyway. What are you talking about? It's going to be illegal in 24 states after the Supreme Court publishes that ruling. And you want it to be illegal in every state. Oh, he saw the polling. The polling indicates that 70% of Americans are pro-choice. Even Sean Hannity is running scared. Meanwhile, Democrats are running into the arms of Republicans on this issue. They're pathetic. But watch this one now. This is the worst of all. If they agree to the 2 compromises to quote unquote get Murkowski and Collins' vote, remember the bill doesn't pass anyway. This is all just games. But what it does do, it allows 2 Republican senators, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, to say, oh, I voted pro-choice. Now, it didn't actually affect anything, but it helps protect those right-wing senators. And the Democrats would love to do nothing more than to help their Republican colleagues. Yeah. That is what the point of this law is to protect people like Collins and Murkowski, passed by the Democrats, having no effect on women's rights. Media, you're embarrassing. Please report actual facts. Everything I'm saying is undeniable. Democratic leadership doesn't care about you, doesn't care about women's rights at all. They care more about protecting anti-choice legislators and Republicans. That's inarguable facts.
You want to take our first break?
Yeah. All right, when we come back, more news. So we point out the lies of both Democrats and Republicans. And then people in Washington go, wait, which side are you on? We're on the side of the truth, you idiots. That's what you're supposed to do in news. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT. Cenk, John, and Marley Lascano. Marley just joined by hitting the join button below the video on YouTube. By the way, if you're on a mobile device, you got to scroll down a little bit further down, but it's right there. It says join. It's easy to see. Chaz Arnold just joined. So Chaz, nice. Thank you as well. If you're not on YouTube, tyt.com/join, just as easy. And you might win a $100 gift card to Blue Apron. It's a true gift card. We're doing that on tomorrow's show. Make sure you sign up for membership so you can win more money than you spend. All right, John, go.
Okay, let's do it. Greg Lopez is a candidate for Colorado governor, and he describes himself as pro-life. He would have you believe that he venerates fetuses, and for some reason doesn't seem why that becomes a bit inconsistent with his history, wherein he apparently assaulted his pregnant wife. Now, this came out in an interview that he had with 9 News Denver's Kyle Clark. We want to read a little bit of the back and forth between them. So Clark had asked him, you are pro-life without exceptions for rape, incest, or even the life and health of the mother. So let's be very clear. He thinks that the mother should die before an abortion is allowed, just to be clear. Additionally, in 1993, you were arrested for violently assaulting your then pregnant wife. Some people might see those two things at odds, but they both involve you exerting control over a woman's body. Is that what Coloradans want from their governor? And he responds, well, first of all, it wasn't a violent situation. If you go back and look, Clark interrupts to say you were arrested for assault. And Lopez's response is, we were both arrested for assault, both of us, okay? Clark points out, as I think most people are probably thinking, well, yeah, but one of you was pregnant. So again, the question is, do Coloradans want somebody who has a history both in word and action of controlling the bodies of women? And this is obviously a serious charge. His response is, let me tell you this, Kyle, here's the thing. There's only been one perfect man that's ever walked this earth and we nailed him to the cross. I'm not a perfect man, I've made my mistakes, but I've learned from them. And I think most people learn from their mistakes. And I think really that's what people want to hear. So Clark says, you don't see it as an issue of control over women's bodies? And Lopez responds, no, I do not. I don't understand how you connect those things. And so to be clear, back in 1993, he and his wife were both cited in a domestic violence incident in which he was accused of pushing his wife, who was 6 months pregnant, to the floor and kicking her after she hit him on the top of the head. He pushed a 6-month pregnant woman to the floor and then kicked her, which is one of the most horrendous sentences I've had to say in a few days. There's other charges as well and allegations about other things that we can get into, Cenk, but it is one thing to claim this was in the past and I've learned from my mistakes. But in every bit of that answer, he showed that he still doesn't think that it was a serious thing, that it's anything anybody should be worried about, that his ongoing belief that he should have ultimate control over what happens to women's bodies isn't a problem. It's not anything you should be worried about. He's trying to make you think that he's learned, and he's demonstrating that he hasn't learned literally anything since 1993.
Yeah, by the way, there's 2 parts of the story. One is the hypocrisy about the assault in the first place. The guy says, where you were charged with assault, he counters, it wasn't violent. And he says, no, but you were charged with assault. And he says, yeah, but we both hit each other.
Okay.
Yeah, that's still violent. I think you just admitted it and don't realize it. And by the way, you hit her first and you threw her down and kicked her when she was pregnant. But it's the heart of the question is exactly right. And that's the main point I wanted to make, which is, look, he thinks if you've been raped, I don't care. I want to use your body as a vessel, okay? You're a convenient chamber for me to possess. And as a government official, I want big government to make sure that we take your liberty away, just like the rapist did, by the way. The rapist did things to you without your consent. Now I want the government to do things to you without your consent. If you thought it was bad, the original act, well, now the government's gonna rape you for 9 months straight by saying, no, you cannot, we don't care about your freedom. We don't care that you're an independent human being. We don't care, we care about controlling you more. Do you need us to throw you down and kick you? That's what he actually believes. He doesn't care about women, of course not. So look, every right winger that says that they want to control women's bodies and they don't care about their consent and they don't care about their freedom and they would rather have big government control them is of course a giant hypocrite and just cares about having power over women. It's disgusting. And this guy is the same as all of them. He's a gross human being.
Yeah, there was a story in the news, I don't know if you saw it, out of India. There was a 13-year-old girl who apparently was gang raped, and she went to a police station, and when she was at the police station, one of the cops raped her. And it's one of the most disgusting news stories that you can imagine, that the people that she should have been able to trust to protect her after this horrendous thing happens to her, instead victimized her even more. Are we better, honestly? As a society, any more, fundamentally accepting of the humanity of women? Not necessarily. By the way, I just want to quickly remind you. So this is the first that I am hearing of this particular guy, Greg Lopez. Again, wants to be Colorado governor. But I want to remind you that he is not unique in having abused the people who trusted him most. Sean Parnell, the only person in the list I'm going to quickly mention who actually eventually was forced to drop out after Trump endorsed him, by the way, was accused of abusing his wife and kids. He was in the Pennsylvania Senate race. They've now moved on to Dr. Oz. I guess that's an improvement. In Missouri, there's Senate candidate Eric Greitens. His ex-wife has accused him of abusing both her and their kids. He's also alleged to have blackmailed a woman that he had an affair with. As far as I know, he's still running, by the way. There's of course Herschel Walker. Again, he doesn't even dispute most of the allegations against him. Max Miller, who just won his primary, endorsed by Donald Trump, is accused of having abused Stephanie Grisham. There's Charles Herbster, who's accused of sexually assaulting 8 different women. It is just all over the map at this point. And one of them has dropped out. Some have already won their primaries, and some it is entirely likely that they will end up in the House and in the Senate. And the Republican Party, the Republican base, doesn't seem to have any sort of problem with this. There was kind of an issue a little bit with Roy Moore. The race was still pretty close. But if it happened today, Cenk, I don't think there'd be any question that Roy Moore would be able to win. The machine has gotten so much more effective at getting their base to accept these absolute monsters.
Yeah, the only person that made a mistake in that list that you read, I don't mean a moral mistake, they're all deeply immoral, as most Republicans are, is Sean Parnell. He shouldn't have dropped out. Beating your wife would be a huge advantage in a Republican primary. It hasn't hurt a single candidate. Remember, Roy Moore won the Republican primary. He lost the general election, but in Alabama, they're like, oh, you were potentially raping children and doing sexual assault. Well, that's perfect. Welcome, you're the Republican leader in this state. It's the guy who beat, what was it, 8 people? They don't have any problem with it. Republicans don't elect these people despite the fact that they're immoral. They elect them because they're immoral. Yeah. So Eric Greitens a great example. Eric Greitens like, oh, take away their liberty. You guys are making it a little too theoretical. I want to do it physically, literally. So his mistress, you didn't add this detail, John. His mistress was tied up in a basement, and then he took pictures of her to blackmail her. Yeah. He's like, look, I just took away her liberty by tying her up in my basement. And Republican voters are like, we like this guy. He was the governor. He was the governor. Okay, so Republicans, they're here for abusing women. They do it through their laws, and then they do it physically and literally, and then they get rewarded by winning primaries.
Yeah, and those same exact Republicans that don't have a problem with all of what we just described. You knock a pregnant woman on the ground, you kick her, you sexually assault multiple of your Republican female colleagues. They don't have a problem with that. But they were really incensed at what happened in that photo with Al Franken and with Katie Hill. They were just appalled by what they saw. Oh, and Madison Cawthorn with his video. They're appalled by that. It's unacceptable, immoral behavior. Totally fine with this. They don't have a problem. seems a little bit inconsistent.
They don't have a problem with anything. Scott DeJarlais in Tennessee paid for 3 abortions, 2 for his wife and 1 for his mistress. Republicans happily reelected him because they don't care about babies. They don't care about lives. All they want to do is be able to control women. So, and they're a deeply immoral party. And by the way, we say that all the time, and Democratic leaders attack us. They say you are being unkind to Republicans. I can't believe you did that to our Republican friends. When are you going to stop fighting them?
Okay, so what do you think time-wise?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay, well then in that case, sure, why don't we jump to this next video?
On the rush to cling to this potential decision in the Supreme Court that would overrule Roe v. Wade, number one, Joe Biden supported a constitutional amendment to get rid of it. Interesting, he's not been asked the question. Ruth Bader Ginsburg pretty much saying and arguing what I had said all my career, which I thought it was bad law. It'll be returned to the states. Abortion is not going to be unavailable or illegal in America, so they're demagoguing that issue. I'm arguing the reason they're doing it is because they don't have anything else that they can run on and say, hey, we did this, this, and this, and we're all better off because of it. Am I wrong?
Well, I think when you look at the different efforts to assault our freedom and democracy, it continuously points to the fact that they're afraid of the people. They're afraid of us. They're afraid of this question being put to the people through their state legislatures, for the people's voices to be heard.
So that is, of course, Tulsi Gabbard, leftist, she would have you believe. She was brought on Sean Hannity to represent the left, to give a leftist perspective on the fact that the Supreme Court is killing Roe v. Wade. And she immediately began talking about the assault on our freedoms, but she was not talking about reproductive rights. She was not talking about those freedoms being taken away or the next steps that they might take to get rid of same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, allow for forced sterilization. She was talking about the Democrats there. So that is what she was brought on. She was brought on to use whatever lingering credibility she has as having formerly been a leftist to agree with everything the right says. And I, in principle, we've said this from time to time, going on Fox News to give a left perspective, to disagree with them makes some sense. You have to do it the right way, but it makes some sense. Going on night after night after night after night to agree with literally everything they say, what exactly is the purpose there? For the movement, there's obviously a purpose for the individual. You can promote projects that you're involved in. You might get paid for your appearances. It's really good for individually for these supposed former leftists, but that is not a defense of people's reproductive rights. And this is from someone who, by the way, has a mixed record, as you might imagine, on this topic, as she does with a lot of other ones, same-sex marriage and all that. But she has occasionally sort of performatively pretended to be pro-choice. If I could jump ahead just a little bit, she said in 2020, when she wanted to be the Democratic nominee for president, the very real possibility of Roe v. Wade being overturned terrifies me. I am sick of women's bodies being used as pawns so politicians can score cheap political points at the expense of their freedom and safety. That was 2 years ago. That's it. Not ancient history, not back in her youth in Hawaii or whatever. That was 2 years ago. She would have you believe that she understood that the right did this specifically because they don't give a damn about women and they believe that they can score some points with their base. Now, who's scoring points with the right on this topic? In that video, it was Tulsi Gabbard. What do you think, Cenk?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things here, including Sean Hannity said something really interesting that I don't want you to lose track of. He might, they're worried about this issue of abortion. That's fascinating. I'm gonna come back to that. But as far as Tulsi goes, he says, am I getting anything wrong here? Tulsi's like, is this the time I kiss your ass? I get paid to kiss your ass now, right? Okay, here I'll pucker up, okay? So Tulsi is the biggest flip-flopper of all time. She's just a self-aggrandizer. All she cares about is power, fame, money. It's usually a word for that. And so before in her career, she wanted abortion made illegal after 5 months. Then she turned around because she thought she had an advantage pretending to be a progressive, and did that quote that John read you about how the idea of Roe being overturned terrifies her. It terrifies her. Now you saw her right there say, the state should have the freedom to decide. Well, that's the exact opposite of Roe. Then you think Roe should be overturned so that the states can decide, and there should be no constitutional ban on abortions, like on the right to have an abortion, right? So, and by the way, later in the interview, she reiterated she's definitely against Roe now. What is the only thing that changed between her earlier policy where she said taking it away terrifies me to now celebrating that it was taken away or is going to be taken away on Fox News with Sean Hannity? The only difference is cash. They made it rain. Her, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, all those guys are like, oh, Republican money, I love it. Okay, so they stripped down their original ideas and now have adopted right-wing ideas. But really, right-wingers, do you fall for this trick? Do you still fall? Are you that dumb? Like, oh, this is leftist Tulsi Gabbard. She now, because we paid her a lot of money, agrees with everything we say. Oh, look at her. Even the left agrees. We are so reasonable. Man, Fox News has been doing that trick for 20 years now. You guys still haven't caught on? God, you guys are pathetic.
The only thing I would add to that is it's fairly see-through why some right-wingers would like to see someone who they can put a chyron and say that they were a leftist or a liberal or whatever. Like they'd have Dave Rubin on and pretend that at any point he was actually on the left. Because they want to believe that they're persuasive. That's why they love Ben Shapiro. They love the idea that he's persuading people. It's a fiction, it's not true. But the issue is that they, as you say, they've been playing this game for like 20 years. They'll have, a Democrat or a leftist on or whatever. But at that point, they would still disagree to some extent. The issue now is if you want right-wing viewers, if you want right-wingers to subscribe to your Substack, if you want right-wing money, there's no room for dissension. There's no room for mostly agreeing with them, but being off on a few other things. You can't do that because everybody's been trained to expect 100% purity. It's like Breaking Bad. They're not gonna go for the inferior product anymore. So you're gonna barter whatever credibility you still have in people remembering that at one point you were a leftist, but you can never say anything that disagrees with the right wingers. So at a certain point, like this is a question for the conservatives. What is the point of all this? Like, why watch one of these former leftists when they're just doing a Tucker Carlson impression? Or in the case of Tulsi, she's doing a Sean Hannity impression. Why are you wasting your time with that? Why not just go for the more authentic grifter?
Yeah, I'll tell you why, John, because they enjoy the minstrel show. I think that they like to see Tulsi and Glenn and Jimmy and Dave Rubin come out there and humiliate themselves. I think they get a good chuckle out of it. They're like, oh, look at this. We're making him dance. Come on, David, Jimmy, dance for us. They're like, oh yeah, I mean, I'm such a leftist. I'm a classical liberal, but the right wing's right about everything. Where's my money? Oh, the money's getting showered now. Good, dance more. Okay, pathetic, sniveling little, et cetera. You get it. But I'm going to come back to the Hannity point. Did you guys notice? He said abortions are not going to be illegal in America. What are you talking about?
Scared.
It's 16 states automatically trigger laws that make abortion illegal the minute the Supreme Court drops that decision in June. That's next month. There's 24 states that are very, very likely to make it illegal. Sean Hannity knows that. Why is he telling his viewers that the thing they've been looking forward to, that abortion being illegal, is not going to happen? What a weird thing to say. Well, the reason he's saying that is because he saw the polling. And Americans are 70% pro-choice. And now Republicans and even Sean Hannity are crapping themselves thinking, oh no, we might lose elections. Turns out the American people hate us. Hey, bring on Tulsi and Glenn, they'll dance for us.
Yeah. They're running scared. He's been pretending that it's not gonna happen. Everybody in the audience knows that he desperately wants it to happen. And this, like the theory that you just put forward, there really is something to that because this isn't just Sean Hannity. You're seeing Tucker Carlson was like pretending that Alito made clear this would never go further than abortion, as if he doesn't know that Alito's a massive liar and would do whatever he wants. Ben Shapiro, Ann and I were just responding to it yesterday, same exact thing, pretending, no, this doesn't change anything. What, like an entire like think tank infrastructure, like a farm league for right-wing lawyers was set up over the course of decades. Countless millions of dollars put into this. Multiple elections run on it. They've now won on it, and all of a sudden, nothing's gonna change. It's just because they're scared of the electoral implications, which is why, again, I will say to the Democrats, you idiots, make them feel the pain. They know that they're wrong on this issue, that people don't support them. Actually make them feel that.
You know, the super sad thing here is Ben Shapiro and Sean Hannity are wrong. They're worried that the Democrats are gonna win elections because the right wing is so unpopular on this issue of abortion. They're Democrats, guys. They're not gonna fight you. They're not gonna win any elections. They're gonna help you. We told you earlier in the show, they're helping to cover Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins' ass by passing a fake bill that wouldn't actually give women the right to choose, just so that Murkowski and Collins can win their elections.
Yeah.
Democrats aren't gonna fight you. They're your best friends. Democratic leadership can't wait to lose to you. Don't sweat it.
I think that's all the time we have.
Yep. All right, we got a powerful second hour for you guys. And you're gonna love the stories there. Adrian's good joining us. Everybody check out Damage Report. That's John's show. Yeah.
Can I also just let people know, tomorrow is not just a normal Friday. I'm actually calling it Big News Friday. Tune in tomorrow to find out why.
Ooh, Big News Friday. Okay, I'm gonna check that out. All right, we'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.